So I returned from moving house to discover that the YouTube Creator Studio had exploded, and at the same time The Sims had apparently released an update that was not very stable. So after a little bit more of a delay than I anticipated, I am back continuing with another giant fairy garden build today. So while I was moving, I did dabble in The Sims a little bit, and I've essentially turned this entire neighborhood in the new Init Green world into what looks like a really big garden. I've just used toolmod to just nudge things out of all 5 of the lots, and I've made this big wall using the live edit stuff from the Enchanted by Nudists pack, and this is the lot that we're going to be working on today. It's like a little corner lot, and we're going to do a fountain with a hidden waterfall. So of course I have my mannequin here for scale, and we're going to begin with a little bit more toolmod. So this is essentially the same thing I did to nudge all of these other items beyond the lot barriers to create this garden neighborhood looking thing. I'm just clicking things and shoving them off the lot with toolmod really. I did think I had a ginormous issue when I came back to try and build because it wasn't letting me save lots. Apparently that was toolmod, so I updated that and now I can save lots again, so thank God, because I was really stressing out figuring what on earth I'm going to do for the next build if I can't save lots, you know, like I was thinking, am I going to have to do Inzoi again? But I'm using all of these rocks to create a sort of pond shape. And then I'm going to use the terrain tool here to lift this ground up to be level with these rocks so that we can then create sort of like a faux wall. We can lower the terrain within the terrain that we've lifted up. Now, I did have a few issues with this. Some of the items were sort of conflicting with the ground elevation. I had to nudge them out of the way off lot and bring them back again in order to move the ground and to elevate it and flatten it. There was just some kind of error that was going on. I guess it's because it's, you know, live mode items that are nudged outside the lot, and it was just, the game just wasn't particularly happy about it, but it was fine. I fixed it. I could just move things around. I'm going to nudge some of the rocks down with toolmod, and then we're going to create a shallow area within the raised ground that we've made so that we essentially just have a very small raised wall, which we can then use as the exterior for the pond to place some water in now here. So we've done that. And some of the edges do show, so I'm going to clean that up just a little bit using the flatten to terrain, flatten to current height brush, I guess it's called. And then I have to nudge some of these rocks back into place, so just using a little bit of tool mod here to nudge them down, align them, make sure everything looks nice. I think the rocks might actually be from that silly Star Wars pack. But I don't... Journey to Batu, is it called? I don't know. But I think they're from that one. But what I'm going to make here now is a little box, which is going to be our waterfall. And I did find some pictures. I was looking on Pinterest for like garden features, garden ponds, garden waterfalls. And at this point, I hadn't really thought that, because I'm doing this and trying to make it look like giant scale, that most of the water items in this game, you can't actually scale up. The water, like, particle effects and things will not scale up. So I was a little bit struggling with this, and we'll move on to quite a large section where I'm going to do the waterfall very shortly. But I just made this a square that in the sort of thing that I'd seen was a sort of raised flower bed with water coming out of it. So now we are going to move on to the waterfall. And I started off here, and this is a lot of trial and error, but I'm using these pre-made rock waterfall things, which again, like, you can't size these up and down because the water doesn't size up and down. So it's been a little bit difficult doing this one. But we're also going to use some fountain nozzles. I don't know, like whatever you would call them, with all the different water effects to create. Essentially, at the end, what I'm going to try and make look like a natural looking waterfall that doesn't ruin the scale. So I have inserted a sim here, just some random guy. Don't pay him any attention. He's basic, he's boring, he's not important here. He's just here so that I can play the game, so that I can see what the water's going to do. So I'm placing these nozzles here, and I think it's the jet ones that I'm using. I can't really particularly remember. At this point, I was just trying to figure out what's the best size to use. I'd never used these before. I've not done waterfalls or fountains before, so this was a sort of new thing for me. And I'm floating up some of these other waterfalls as well. And I'm just going to try and layer this up to make it look rocky and like it actually works cohesively with this sort of raised flower bed that it's meant to be coming out of. And I do end up putting too many water features in. We'll be removing some. But this is sort of, you know, like where we're at. what we're doing. And I'm also going to use some of these larger waterfall things. Again, you can't size these up. I wish I could size these up, but you can't because the water isn't going to size up. It's just the frame. So it was a little bit difficult doing this. But I'm doing this because, well, I did mention in the last video, but I had this idea that this will be like where the dragonfly fairies in the garden live. And I don't actually make the dragonfly fairies in this. I just did the build because I was a little bit disheveled and all over the place after my move. But that was the idea behind this, is this is sort of going to be a hidden sort of hideaway home behind the waterfall that we're going to go in and do, where the dragonfly fairies can live. And of course, if you try and use this build for a non-fairy, it's probably going to be difficult because you want the fairies to be able to teleport to places. It's not a very navigatable lot that I've built here. It's more just for the visual and can we do it, and I was just continuing with my like, what can I make in a ginormous garden and do it in a sort of realistic way kind of thing. So shortly we will fast forward a little bit to when I've figured out what I'm going to do with this waterfall, and it will change a little bit. We pull away. When I'm doing something new, I tend to do a bit too much, and then I pull it away and sort of reveal and find the actual thing that looks decent behind the complete mess that I've made. Which currently this is the complete mess. It's not looking great, I'll be honest. It's looking a bit weird. We do change that. I think we're gonna have a little transition coming up very shortly. Let's see here. There we go. So here is the finish, and it looks a lot more natural, and I just moved things around. I've done nothing different here. I've just used the same objects. I've just sort of reorganized things, pulled things away, made the shapes look a bit more precise and purposeful, and I've tried to make it look like the water's flowing through these rocks. I wish I could size things up and it would have looked a little bit more natural with the whole like giant scale thing, but I'm fairly happy with this. We're just gonna stick some platform on the top here because we're gonna raise that up to actually be the sort of flower bed edging to this raised flower bed fountain waterfall thing that I made. And I also wanted to create it so that it looks like we've got flowing water coming through the middle of this section here. So the way that I'm going to do that is, even though we can't size these up and down because of the water in the waterfall, it won't scale up and down. We can oddly rotate it with the tool mod and it will rotate. So I've rotated it so it looks like the water's flowing through, and I'm just going to try and cover up these edges a little bit by using some rock work. To create this impression that the water's flowing through from the back of the fountain somewhere down into the waterfall and then into the pond. I was really wanting to make it look like a realistic sort of water feature. So just covering this up as much as I can so that it looks natural. I wanted the rest of the garden we've done looking very natural, so I wanted to do that with this one as well. And then to create the impression that this is large stones, I've actually used these get together. They're in the rug category, but they're actually like stone pieces, just scaled them up, so it looks like the fountain's made of larger stones. So I'm just painting in the water here because it was looking a bit bright and silly and ridiculous. And now we're going to move on to the interior, which is just going to be very sort of like my other fairy ones, where we're not splitting this into different we're not having like a bathroom and a kitchen and a blah blah blah, because the fairies can just use that little fairy house, which I think is very cheap. And I still really don't know what the whole gameplay thing about fairies is meant to be, if you can just solve every problem with a little fairy house. But there we go, that's what we'll be using in here, which then frees me up to be a creative maniac and not have to worry about making all of these rooms and facilities for them, which I enjoy. So that's what we're doing here, and I'm using some of these Jungle Adventure sort of elemental kind of rock tiles on the walls because I thought that felt very naturey. It was sort of this fantasy fairy kind of vibe that I was going for. And then I've stuck a few more rocks in here, and we're going to light this place up with the Enchanted by Nudists tree thing. And then I'm also using some of these. What are these? Who are these from? Remind me. Wedding Stories? Yeah, the plants, because I thought those looked... I like the way they drape over this sort of like rock thing that's sticking into the lot from when I previously nudged that out to create this giant garden. So I've also put a mirror in here, which in the last build I explained there's sort of the idea that these are used as portals to get around the garden with like that magical element we have going on. And I'm just making this very floral. How these grow in here when they don't get sunlight, I'm not quite sure, but I didn't really think about it. And I'm just going to say it's because it's magic, and that solves every problem here. So just don't think about it too much, it's fine. But again, using these newer plants that look very whimsical. And then I'm coming in with another one of these bee chairs, which I used in the previous one because this is a day insect. So they have the yellow chair because that's the day chair. And it's just all very complicated and unnecessary, really, in my head, what's going on here and why I do these things. But we are going to use some of these mushroom little... They're like little strollers for mushrooms. I don't know what's going on here. Are we cultivating mushrooms and raising them as little babies like eggs? I don't know. But we're sticking some of those in. And then I'm also putting in some of these new... bookshelves that hang on the wall that are very natural wood shaped, and then I'm using some of these mushroom shelves, which I never use as shelves but instead use as a decorative mushroom item, which I've seen a lot of other people doing too, so I don't really feel like I'm very groundbreaking by doing that, but I like to think that this was all my idea. And and just decorate this place up and make it look nice. And then yeah, the Sims can just like teleport in here so long as they're a fairy and do very little other than use the fairy house, which just solves every problem, I guess. So that's the interior. And now we're going to move on to some exterior details to finish this lot off. I'm going to add the little flower bed on top of the water feature here. I'm using some grass, layering that up. And I wanted to do this to make it look a bit more like it was connected to this ginormous wall thing at the back, rather than just floating in. Obviously, I can't pull the wall that far out because it extends beyond the lot and the game won't let me do that. But we can stick these plants so they look like they're sort of overlapping a little bit. There is a small gap, but it's not really noticeable. So now that looks like it's sort of coming out of the rock work. Going to make a little deeper area in the pond here so that Sims can bathe themselves with the new, like, you know, wash yourselves outdoors feature. And then I'm using these get-together benches to create some kind of... Again, I was thinking of sort of like Lord of the Rings fairy, sort of that kind of style thing where they have all the very old rock work and it's sort of historic and slightly derelict, a little bit like worn, I guess, is the idea here. And I just like the idea that the fairies can just sit around on those and, you know, you can add in whatever you want, I guess. And they can do activities in the water, maybe. Maybe this is another meeting area and then they decide what they're going to take to the, you know, council of the garden. And then come back and sit around and discuss how the garden politics are going. I don't know. it's just a seating area. It's fine. Don't overthink it. So I'm sticking in some grass here. Just sort of using a lot of foliage to make these edges look a bit more natural, but not overgrown because I wanted this garden to look like it was actually kept quite nice and tasteful by the old lady who lives here, who I decided is Bonkers Betty from my Widow Creek series. And she just doesn't know that there's fairies living in the garden, but I'm sure if she did know, she wouldn't actually mind, because she is bonkers. Some of these rocks have nudged up while we've been doing this, so I need to nudge these back down again using the tool mod. If you don't have tool mod, you can still download builds using the tool mod. It's fine, you don't actually need it. So I will put this one on the gallery. And we have our mannequin almost... You can see the scale of what's going on here. The mannequin really helps in these giant builds to show you that it is actually giant. Because in some of them they start to look a bit... Even I myself am looking at it and I'm like, how big is this? I don't get it. my brain just isn't... so we're just going to finish off with a few lily pads and various other things. I also put in some of the grass pond items that spawn fireflies at night. Unfortunately, it would not let me go in. I guess because of the game update, it wouldn't let me then play this in real time at the end very well. And by the time I'd managed to fix that, I completely forgot to take any nighttime shots. So I do apologize for that. We're just going to have daytime ones as we go through and look at this. But I'm finishing off with these bushes that are a live edit one, but I like these because they flow down rocks really nicely. I don't remember the name of them, so don't ask me. They're just green plants. So now we go moving on, and we'll have a look at what we built today. So here it is in a nice daylight scene, and the water's flowing. It's a little bit sprayy for a waterfall. It's just slightly chaotic. Maybe some of the nozzles need a clean, but as far as making a giant scaled down waterfall looks, scaled up, scaled down, I don't know. Anyway, let's move inside and have a little look at what's going on here. We have the little houses here. They're the only items that's necessary. The rest of it's just decoration, because why add gameplay for fairies when they can just have a single item? And moving down here, and you'll see we have the little chair area leading to the portal mirror to go and have their little meetings at the bird table that we made in the last one. There's 2 more lots in this build, so I will go around and do those so long as the game is working okay and it's not still completely broken. But there we go. That was our our build after I've come back a little bit disheveled from my house move. But thank you so much for watching. Be kind to yourselves, and I will see you in the next one.